In our quiet kitchen, my wife asked me for a divorce. And the strangest part? She wasn't crying. The clock read 7:12 p.m. The pasta on the stove had already gone cold. The soft hum of the refrigerator, the steady ticking of the wall clock, those were the only sounds in the room. And then she said it. I want a divorce. My name is Daniel. And in that moment, it felt like someone had pressed mute on my entire world. There was no fight. No cheating. No dramatic explosion. Just silence. She stood across from me, arms folded. Her wedding ring was still on her finger, but somehow, it looked like it already belonged to the past. Say that again, I whispered, hoping maybe I had heard it wrong. I want a divorce, she repeated. Same tone. Same calmness. If she had screamed, maybe it wouldn't have hurt this much. But her calmness, her certainty, that's what shattered me. I kept staring at her. This was the same woman who used to hide her face in my chest during thunderstorms. The same woman who stood in a small church filled with white roses on our wedding day and promised, forever. 10 years. 10 years collapsed into a single sentence. What happened? I asked. And I will never forget her answer. Nothing happened, she said. That's the problem. I didn't understand at first. I come home. I pay the bills. I take care of us, I started to say. But she cut me off. You're physically here, she said. But emotionally? You left years ago. That line hit me straight in the chest. You're always working. Always distracted. Even when you're sitting next to me, I feel alone. Alone. My wife, feeling alone while standing right in front of me. And I didn't even see it. Then she said the sentence that made my heartbeat double. You have one sentence, she said. One sentence to tell me why I shouldn't leave. One sentence. Just one. 10 years of love, reduced to a single breath. My mind raced. Sorry sounded cheap. I'll change sounded predictable. I love you felt insufficient. She was already emotionally halfway out the door. I slowly walked toward her. Every step felt heavy. There were only 2 feet between us, but emotionally, it felt like miles. I looked into her eyes. She looked strong. But underneath that strength, she looked tired. And in that moment, I made a decision. I wasn't going to impress her. I was going to tell the truth. If you walk out that door tonight, I said quietly, I won't stop you. Her eyes blinked slightly. But I will spend the rest of my life proving that I was always worth fighting for. Silence. The ticking of the clock suddenly felt louder. She stared at me. For the first time that night, her eyes weren't steady. Proving, she asked. You had years to prove it. And she was right. Somewhere along the way, I became a provider. And forgot how to be a partner. I thought long hours meant sacrifice. I thought financial stability meant love. But I never realized she didn't marry me for money. She married me for presence. And I had been absent. I pulled out a chair and sat down. Sit, I said softly. Not as husband and wife. Just as 2 people who once chose each other. She hesitated. Then she Saturday. When was the last time we had dinner without our phones? I asked. Silence. When was the last time I asked you if you were happy? Her eyes turned glassy. I don't need flowers, she said quietly. I don't need trips. I need you. Simple. But powerful. That night, we didn't argue. We talked. Really talked. About unresolved fights. Missed anniversaries. Cancelled plans. She said, when I imagine the future, you're busy. And I'm alone. And that's when I realized something. I wasn't the villain. But I was negligent. And sometimes, negligence hurts more than betrayal. We talked until 3 a.m. I didn't defend myself. I listened. And while listening, I realized something else. She didn't want to leave me. She wanted to stop feeling lonely. It took me 10 years to understand that difference. Morning light began slipping through the curtains. The divorce papers were still on the counter. Unsigned. She stood up and walked into the kitchen. I followed. She was staring at the door, the same door she could walk out of. I need a guarantee, she said. A guarantee? I asked. That you won't disappear again. I stepped closer. I'm not perfect, I said. But I'm here. And if I ever start slipping again, remind me. This time, I'll listen. She looked at me for a few long seconds. Then she picked up the divorce papers. My heart froze. And then, rip. She tore them in half. I don't want a perfect marriage, she said. I want a present husband. I slowly stepped closer. You have one, I said. This time, she was crying. And so was I. The kitchen was the same. The clock was the same. But we were different. That night, I learned something important. Marriages don't break because of big dramatic moments. They break because of silence. And sometimes, one honest sentence is enough to break that silence. And maybe, save everything. She stared at me like she was looking at a stranger. Not with anger. Not even with hatred. But with disappointment. Proving, she asked quietly. You've had years to prove it. And the worst part? She wasn't wrong. There are moments in life when you realize you've been telling yourself a story that isn't true. I told myself I was a good husband. I paid the bills. I worked overtime. I built stability. But somewhere between promotions and deadlines, I confused providing with loving. I thought long hours meant devotion. I thought financial security meant emotional safety. I thought exhaustion was proof of sacrifice. But I had stopped noticing the small things. The way she paused before speaking, like she was deciding if it was even worth finishing her sentence. The way her smile had slowly faded in photographs. The way she stopped asking me to watch movies with her, because she already knew I'd say I was busy. I thought I was doing this for us, I said quietly. She didn't raise her voice. You stopped doing anything with us, she replied. And then her voice cracked. Just slightly. But that crack hit harder than the word divorce. Because that crack wasn't anger. It was exhaustion. Exhaustion from trying alone. I walked toward the table slowly and pulled out a chair. Sit with me, I said gently. Not as husband and wife. Just as two people who once chose each other. She hesitated. For a second, I thought she would refuse. But then, she sat a day. Not close to me. But not far either. The distance between our chairs felt symbolic. Close enough to touch. Far enough to feel cold. When was the last time we had dinner without our phones? I asked. She didn't answer. She didn't need to. Because we both knew the answer. I tried again. When was the last time I asked you about your dreams, instead of telling you about my meetings? Silence again. The kind of silence that forces truth to surface. I took a deep breath. You feel alone, I said slowly, because I left you alone. Not physically, but emotionally. Saying it out loud hurt. Because it was true. And I didn't even see it. Her eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them back quickly like she had gotten used to swallowing her emotions. I don't need grand gestures, she whispered. Not flowers. Not vacations. Not anniversary posts on social media. I need presence. Presence. Such a simple word. But it carries weight. It means looking at someone when they speak. It means noticing when their energy shifts. It means choosing them even when work feels urgent. For the first time that night, I truly understood. This wasn't about betrayal. It wasn't about another man. It wasn't about some dramatic explosion. It was about distance. Slow, quiet distance. The kind that grows inch by inch until one day you wake up and realize you're strangers sharing the same house. And distance, unlike heartbreak, can still be closed. But only if both people are willing to move. I won't beg, I said softly. Because begging doesn't rebuild trust. But I will change. Not tomorrow. Not after you leave. Now. She looked at me carefully. Not emotionally. Analytically. Like she was measuring the weight of my words. Words are easy, she said. And again, she was right. Anyone can promise. Anyone can say I'll do better. But consistency is proof. I nodded slowly. Then let me show you. She leaned back in her chair slightly. Show me how, she asked. And that question forced me to think. Not emotionally. Practically. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. The same phone that had interrupted countless dinners. The same phone that always felt more urgent than her stories. I turned it off. Completely. And placed it in the center of the table. Starting now, I said. She looked at it. Then at me. This doesn't fix 10 years, she said. No, I agreed. But it fixes this moment. I stood up, walked into the living room, and grabbed my laptop from my work bag. The bag that followed me everywhere. I brought it back to the kitchen. And I closed it. Not gently. Not dramatically. Just firmly. I told my team I'd be available tonight, I said. I'm sending one message. I turned the phone back on for 10 seconds. Typed. Family emergency. I'm offline. And then turned it off again. I slid it across the table toward her. You matter more. Her eyes shifted slightly. Not convinced. But not closed either. You always say work is temporary pressure, she said. But it's been temporary for years. And that line stung. Because she had been living in my just for now for a decade. I was scared, I admitted. Scared of what? Failing. I swallowed. My father lost everything once. I watched my mother panic about bills. I promised myself my family would never feel that. She softened slightly. I thought if I worked harder, earned more, built more, I was protecting us. And who was protecting us from you being gone? She asked quietly. That question hit deeper than anything else. Because I had been protecting us from financial storms, while ignoring emotional ones. I didn't see it, I said again. She exhaled slowly. You stopped seeing me. Not angrily. Not accusing. Just, honestly. And maybe that honesty hurt the most. I leaned forward. Then help me see you again. Her eyes flickered. Talk to me, I said. Not about what I did wrong. Tell me what you need. She hesitated. Like she wasn't used to being asked that anymore. I need to feel chosen, she said finally. Chosen how? When you come home. I don't want to compete with emails. When I talk. I don't want to feel like background noise. When I sit next to you. I want to feel like you want to be there. Simple needs. Basic needs. Needs I should have noticed without her asking. I can do that, I said. Can you sustain that? She asked. There it was. The real question. Not change. Consistency. I don't want to lose you, I said quietly. But more than that. I don't want you to feel alone while standing next to me. Silence settled again. But this silence felt different. Less hostile. More thoughtful. She reached for the edge of the table. Not my hand. But closer than before. I'm tired, she admitted. Of fighting. Of trying by myself. That broke something in me. Because I never realized she had been fighting alone. I'm here now, I said. Are you? She asked softly. I didn't rush to answer. Because this time. I didn't want to give her another easy sentence. Instead, I stood up. Walked around the table. And sat in the chair beside her. Not across. Beside. Close enough that our arms almost touched. I'm here, I repeated. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just steadily. And for the first time that night. She didn't look at me like a stranger. She looked at me like someone deciding whether to believe again. And maybe. Just maybe. This wasn't about saving a marriage in one sentence. Maybe it was about rebuilding it. One present moment at a time. That night, no one left. The door stayed closed. The divorce papers were still torn on the counter. And the house, the same house that had felt like a battlefield just hours earlier, became something else. A confession room. We didn't touch. We didn't pretend everything was fine. There were no dramatic hugs. No sudden forgiveness. Just two exhausted people sitting in the quiet. And we talked. 4 hours. Not the surface-level conversations we'd been having for years. Not how was work. Not what do you want for dinner. Real conversation. The kind that makes your chest feel tight. The kind that forces you to look at yourself. We started with memories. The first apartment, she said softly. I almost smiled. The one with the leaking ceiling? I asked. She nodded. We both laughed, quietly. Back then, we had nothing. The paint was peeling. The neighbors were loud. The kitchen was barely big enough for 2 people. But we were happy. We used to put a bucket under the leak when it rained. And instead of complaining, we'd sit on the floor eating cheap takeout, pretending we were investing in character development. We didn't have money. But we had each other. So what changed? She asked gently. I didn't answer immediately. Because the truth wasn't simple. Ambition changed things. Responsibility changed things. Fear changed things. We kept talking. Do you remember the night we stayed up picking baby names? She asked. My chest tightened. I remembered. We had spread a notebook across the bed. We wrote down dozens of names. Argued about which ones sounded strong. Which ones sounded soft. Which ones felt right. We never got to use them. Life had other plans. And somewhere along the way, that loss created a silence between us we never fully addressed. Instead of grieving together, we buried ourselves in distractions. She buried herself in routines. I buried myself in work. I felt like we stopped dreaming after that, she said quietly. That hit hard. Because she was right. We had survived pain. But we didn't heal from it. We moved forward, without processing it. And unprocessed pain has a way of building walls. It was messy. Honest. Uncomfortable. At one point, she said something that completely shattered me. I started imagining a life without you. The room felt colder. And it scared me how peaceful it felt. That sentence broke something inside me. Peaceful. Not exciting. Not romantic. Peaceful. The absence of me felt calm. Every instinct inside me wanted to defend myself. To say, you don't mean that. To remind her of everything I had done. But for the first time in years, I didn't argue. I listened. Because defending myself would only prove her point. Instead, I swallowed my pride. I don't want to be your peace, I said quietly. She looked up. I want to be your partner. There's a difference. Peace can mean absence of chaos. Partnership means shared weight. Shared struggle. Shared growth. She studied me carefully. Like she was trying to figure out if this was temporary guilt or permanent change. Why now? She asked. And that question was fair. Why not last year? Why not 5 years ago? Why not after the first time she said she felt lonely? Because tonight, I said slowly, you made me realize I was about to lose the only thing that actually matters. Work can be replaced. Money can be earned again. Titles can change. But her. If she walked out that door, that loss would be permanent. And for the first time, I truly felt it. The truth hung between us. Not dramatic. Not explosive. Just heavy. We kept talking. About fights we never properly finished. Arguments that ended with we'll talk later and never did. Moments when she reached for my hand, and I pulled away to answer a call. Moments when I came home late and assumed she would understand. I always believed love meant staying. But I learned that night. Love also means showing up. Emotionally. Consistently. Around 3 a.m., the house was completely silent. Even the refrigerator hum felt softer. Exhaustion began to show on her face. Not just physical exhaustion. Emotional. You really didn't see how far apart we drifted, she asked. Her voice wasn't accusing. It was confused. No, I admitted. And that's my failure. Admitting that felt strange. I'm not someone who easily admits failure. But in that moment, ego didn't matter. Winning didn't matter. Being right didn't matter. For the first time in years. There were no ego battles. No scorekeeping. No who hurt who more. Just 2 people choosing honesty over pride. And that felt different. We moved from the kitchen to the living room. Sat on opposite ends of the couch at first. But as the hours passed, the space between us slowly shrank. Not intentionally. Not dramatically. Just naturally. At one point, our knees almost touched. Neither of us moved away. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't passionate. It was cautious. Like two people relearning how to exist in the same space. You stopped looking at me, she said softly. That one hurt. I see you, I replied instinctively. She shook her head. You see through me. That sentence lingered. Because I realized she was right. I saw responsibilities. Schedules. Tasks. But I stopped seeing her. Her expressions. Her pauses. Her unspoken frustrations. I don't want to disappear in my own marriage, she whispered. And in that moment, I understood something clearly. She wasn't trying to leave me. She was trying to find herself again. And somewhere in that search, she lost us. As the first hint of dawn began slipping through the curtains, the room changed color. The dark blue of night slowly turned into soft gray. We had been talking for hours. No phones. No distractions. Just truth. She hadn't said she was staying. But she hadn't said she was leaving either. And strangely, that felt like hope. Not certainty. Not victory. Hope. Because hope means possibility. It means there's still something worth saving. She stood up slowly and walked toward the window. The early morning light touched her face. She looked tired. But lighter. Not healed. But heard. I walked up beside her. Not too close. Just close enough. We're not fixed, she said quietly. I know, I replied. But we're not silent anymore. She nodded slightly. And that nod meant everything. Because silence was what nearly destroyed us. And conversation was what kept the door closed that night. When the sun finally rose fully over the horizon, we were still standing there. Not as enemies. Not as strangers. But as two people at a crossroads. And for the first time in a long time, we were facing the same direction. Together. Change didn't happen overnight. There was no dramatic morning where everything felt fixed. No magical reset button. No sudden perfection. It happened quietly. In small things. The next evening, I came home at 6:02 p.m. Not 8:30. Not sorry, I got stuck at work. Not just one more meeting. 6:02. She noticed. She didn't say anything at first. But I saw it in her eyes, surprise. Not excitement. Not relief. Just surprise. Consistency begins with showing up. And I had stopped showing up years ago. That night, during dinner, my phone buzzed. Reflexively, my hand almost reached for it. But I stopped. I picked up my phone, walked into the living room, and left it on the coffee table. Face down. When I came back to the table, she was watching me carefully. You're not going to check it, she asked. It can wait, I said. She nodded slowly. We ate in silence for a few seconds. But this silence felt different. It wasn't heavy. It wasn't distant. It felt intentional. When was the last time you had a good day? I asked her. She looked up, slightly confused. What? At work? Or anywhere? When was the last time you had a good day? She blinked. Like she wasn't used to the question. And that realization alone hurt. We had lived together for years. But I had stopped asking about her world. She started talking slowly. About a project she'd been working on. About a coworker who annoyed her. About a small success she didn't even think was worth mentioning before. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't interrupt. I didn't offer solutions. I didn't say, here's what you should do. I just listened. Fully. Completely. That night, when we cleared the table together, something felt lighter. Not fixed. But lighter. The next day, I stopped by her favorite coffee shop after work. I remembered her order. Vanilla latte. Extra foam. I used to know it by heart. Somehow, I had forgotten. When I handed it to her, she looked at the cup. Then at me. Suspicious. Is this temporary? She asked quietly. That question carried history. Disappointment. Fear of false hope. No, I replied. This is overdue. She didn't smile immediately. But she didn't reject it either. Trust doesn't rebuild in grand gestures. It rebuilds in repetition. In consistency. In showing up again, and again, and again. Weeks passed. Not dramatically. Not perfectly. Just steadily. I kept coming home on time. Not occasionally. Consistently. I left my phone in another room during dinner. Every night. Even when work felt urgent. Because I finally understood something. Urgent is not the same as important. One evening, I made a stupid joke. Something small. Something unplanned. And she laughed. A real laugh. Not polite. Not forced. It caught both of us off guard. She covered her mouth slightly, like she was surprised by herself. I missed that sound, I admitted quietly. She didn't look away this time. That was progress. We started taking evening walks. Just around the neighborhood. No big conversations. No heavy topics. Sometimes we talked about random things. Sometimes we walked in silence. But it wasn't empty silence. It was peaceful. The kind of silence that feels shared. One night, we decided to cook together. Like we used to. We chopped vegetables. Argued about seasoning. Burned the garlic. And for the first time in months, we laughed in the kitchen. The same kitchen where she had asked for a divorce. Funny how places can hold both endings and beginnings. Those ordinary moments felt extraordinary because they were intentional. Because we were choosing each other daily. But healing isn't linear. There were setbacks. Moments when I almost slipped back into old habits. One evening, I stayed late at work. Not extremely late. But later than usual. When I walked through the door, I saw it in her face. The fear. Not anger. Fear. Sorry, I said immediately. And I meant it. I lost track of time. She nodded. But she didn't fully relax. Later that night, as we were sitting on the couch, she said something quietly. I'm still scared. I turned toward her. Of what? She hesitated. That will fall back into old habits. There it was. The real fear. Not that I couldn't change, but that I wouldn't sustain it. That this was temporary effort driven by crisis. And once the crisis faded, so would the effort. I understood that fear. Because honestly, I feared it too. Old habits are comfortable. Work had been my comfort zone. Distance had been my autopilot. Changing meant awareness. Constant awareness. I reached for her hand slowly, not abruptly, not possessively, gently, giving her space to pull away if she wanted. She didn't. Her hand stayed in mine. Warm. Real. Then we fight the habits, I said softly. Not each other. She looked at me carefully, as if weighing those words. Habits are hard to break, she said. I know, I replied. But they're not stronger than choice. We sat there quietly, hands intertwined, not gripping tightly, just holding. For the first time since that night in the kitchen, she squeezed my hand back. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't cinematic. It was small. But that small squeeze meant more than any promise I had made before. Because promises are future-based. That squeeze was present. It was trust. Trying again. And I realized something important. Saving a marriage isn't about one grand speech. It's about daily discipline. About choosing to notice. Choosing to listen. Choosing to prioritize. Over and over. Even when it feels inconvenient. Even when it feels repetitive. Even when no one is watching. Because love isn't built in dramatic moments. It's built in the small ones. Coming home on time. Asking about her day. Burning garlic together. Leaving your phone in another room. Holding her hand without expecting anything in return. Weeks turned into a month. The house felt warmer. Not because nothing hurt anymore, but because we were facing it together. And slowly, very slowly, the distance began shrinking. Not disappearing, but shrinking. And sometimes, that's enough. Music swells softly. Change didn't happen overnight. It happened in small things. And those small things saved us. A month later, the divorce papers were still on the counter. Unsigned. They had become part of the kitchen scenery. Like a silent reminder. Like a test neither of us wanted to mention, but both of us felt. 30 days. 30 days of small changes. 30 days of intentional presence. 30 days of rebuilding something we almost lost. But healing doesn't erase history. It simply rewrites the ending. That morning, sunlight poured through the kitchen windows. Bright. Warm. Calm. She stood in the same spot she had stood a month ago. The same kitchen island. The same counter. The same clock ticking on the wall. But everything felt different. She was holding the papers. Carefully. Like they still carried weight. "This is where it started," she said quietly. Her voice wasn't cold this time. It wasn't distant. It was reflective. I nodded slowly. I didn't rush toward her. I didn't panic. Because this time, I wasn't reacting from fear. I was standing in presence. "If I stay," she continued, her fingers tightening slightly around the pages, "we don't go back to how things were." There it was. Not a threat. Not an ultimatum. A boundary. And boundaries are built from pain. "We won't," I said firmly. Not loudly. Not desperately. Just certain. Because I finally understood something. Change isn't proven by promises. It's proven by consistency. She looked at me for a long moment. Like she was replaying the last 30 days in her mind. The dinners without phones. The evening walks. The conversations that didn't end in defensiveness. The way I looked at her when she spoke. Then her eyes shifted. Toward the door. The same door she almost walked out of that night. I followed her gaze. That door had become symbolic. An exit. An ending. A life without us. The air felt still. The clock ticked again. And in that quiet kitchen, time felt suspended. Then she did something unexpected. She tore the papers in half. The sound echoed through the room. Not violently. Not dramatically. Just firmly. Final. The pieces fell onto the counter. For a second, neither of us spoke. Because sometimes, silence isn't heavy. Sometimes it's sacred. "I don't want a perfect marriage," she said. Her voice trembled slightly, but not from doubt. "I want a present husband." There it was. Not perfection. Not fairytale romance. Presence. And presence is a daily choice. I stepped closer. Slowly. Not to overwhelm her. Not to claim victory. But to meet her where she stood. "You have one," I said. And this time, I meant it with more than words. Her eyes filled with tears. But they weren't the same tears from a month ago. Those tears were heavy. Exhausted. Defeated. These tears were different. Lighter. Relieved. Like someone who had been holding their breath, and finally exhaled. She wrapped her arms around me slowly. Not tightly. Not urgently. Gently. Like she was relearning something familiar. Like she was reminding her body that this was still home. I wrapped my arms around her too. Not possessively. Not fearfully. Steadily. And in that moment, I understood something powerful. We weren't hugging because everything was fixed. We were hugging because we chose to fix it. Together. The kitchen looked the same. Same countertops. Same cabinets. Same clock ticking on the wall. But it no longer felt like the place where everything almost ended. It felt like the place where we started again. A restart doesn't erase history. It builds on it. And as we stood there, sunlight filling the room, I realized something else. That night a month ago, when she gave me one sentence, I thought that sentence saved our marriage. But I was wrong. The sentence didn't save us. The consistency did. The listening did. The small things did. One sentence opened the door. But daily effort kept it closed. She pulled back slightly and looked at me. "Promise me something," she said. "Anything. If you ever feel us drifting again, don't wait for me to say the word divorce." That hit deep. Because sometimes we wait until things explode. Until they break. Until they become unbearable. We don't let it get that far again, she continued. I nodded. We won't. And this time, that wasn't optimism. It was awareness. Love isn't self-sustaining. It requires attention. It requires humility. It requires choosing each other on ordinary days. Not just dramatic ones. She glanced at the torn papers on the counter. We almost threw this away, she whispered. Yeah, I replied softly. But we didn't. And that matters. Because many people don't get this moment. Many people don't get the chance to choose again. We stood there a little longer. Not talking. Just breathing. Together. The door remained closed. Not locked. Not blocked. Just closed. And that made all the difference. Because it wasn't fear keeping her inside. It was choice. And choice is powerful. Later that evening, we cooked dinner again. Nothing fancy. Just something simple. And when the phone buzzed in the other room, I didn't move. She noticed. She smiled. A small one. But real. And in that quiet kitchen. The same place where everything almost ended. We chose each other again. Not because it was easy. Not because it was dramatic. But because it was worth fighting for. Music begins to swell softly. Sometimes people think love ends in shouting matches. In betrayal. In catastrophic moments. But more often. It ends in silence. In distance. In neglect. And sometimes, all it takes to save it, is one honest sentence. Followed by 1,000 consistent actions. That night, she didn't open the door. And neither did I. Because we realized something important. Marriage isn't about never falling apart. It's about deciding, again and again, to put it back together. Together. And sometimes, one sentence really can save a lifetime.